Joshua 1, verse 1 to 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert of Lebanon and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let the book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Let me read that again. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Welcome to Debbie Devries Ministries. Now, after many years of slavery in Egypt and many years of wandering in the desert, after refusing to enter the promised land the first time, even after witnessing God's faithfulness and majestic power time and time again, and for them it was in miraculous ways, but nonetheless the Israelites refused to enter the first time, and now they are finally ready to go in and enter the land promised to their forefathers. There they are, once again standing on the edge of the promised land, but not with Moses this time, as he had died. This time they were standing with Joshua, as God had called him to become the new commander. Now, having been trained by Moses, God was now commissioning Joshua to be the leader in order to lead the people in. Now, side note, he was either, they figure, somewhere in his late 80s or early 90s when this call happened. That means that you and I are never too old to be given the privilege to work alongside God. You know, I'm almost 52 years old, and often I question if I'm too old. And what a ridiculous thought. But anyways, it's interesting to note. So Joshua was destined to lead the people to the fulfillment of this promise. So the question I have is, are you and I willing to entertain the question, is it possible? Could it be possible that you or I have been called, have been destined to fulfill something that God is going to do, to accomplish, something that He's going to accomplish for us, through us? Now, Joshua was told that he was going to lead the children of Israel out of the wilderness, and they were going to cross over the Jordan into what God had for His people. Figuratively speaking, is it possible? Would you be willing to entertain the thought that you or I have been called to lead someone or a group of people out of their wilderness into a more abundant life in their promised land, figuratively speaking, if you will? Now, it's also interesting to note that in these first 9 verses, Joshua is told 3 times to be strong and courageous. Not only that, he was first told by Moses this very thing in Deuteronomy 31, verse 7 and 8. And he was told to be strong and courageous. Let me read it to you. So 7 and 8. Then Moses summoned Joshua, and he said to him in the presence of Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you must go. You must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid or do not be discouraged." Then moving forward into Deuteronomy 31, we read, "The Lord gave this command to Joshua, son of Nun, be strong and courageous, for you will bring the Israelites into the land that I have promised them on oath, and I myself will be with you." And the Israelites themselves actually said the same words to Joshua in verse 18. They said, to their newly appointed leader, be strong and courageous. So in all, that means 6 times that Joshua, 6 times that we have recorded, that Joshua is told to be strong and confident and courageous. Is it possible? Is it possible that Joshua actually wasn't feeling very confident? Is it possible that he wasn't feeling very strong or courageous? Was it possible that he was scared or even unsure of himself? Is it possible that the size and the duration of the task ahead of him, plus the pressure of leading such obstinate, difficult people, and that they were, and the absence of his spiritual mentor Moses were on his mind? But here's the thing. You see, God was not calling him without enabling him. Moses was a shepherd, yes, and he was also a lawgiver. But Joshua was a warrior, and he was taught how to be what he needed to be before he knew what he needed to be, which was a warrior and a leader for God's people in order to fulfill what God promised them. Not only that, in Deuteronomy 31, verse 8 and 23, and in Joshua 1, verse 5 and 9, it says multiple times in different ways, I will never leave you or forsake you, or the Lord himself goes before you, and I myself will be with you. I will be with you wherever you go. God commanded Joshua on the basis of this promise. Another promise being made by God, another promise that he would fulfill. Now, when we read on, we note that Joshua put down whatever it is or was that would have stood in the way of the task given, and he took God at his word, and he led the people. And in verse 10, we see Joshua's immediate response. Now, don't take my word for it. I ask that you take time and you go back and reread the account for yourself. Joshua tells the people to get ready. They're going to cross the Jordan. They're going to march around the walls of Jericho, and they are going to go into the land that God had promised them. Question: has God called you or I to do something or to go somewhere? Are you or I resisting? Are we afraid, or are we feeling inadequate? Do we feel unable to do the work that God has called us to do? Do you have any of these feelings? Here's the thing. Joshua was confident. He chose to be confident in what God said, and he followed God's orders, and he believed, and he moved forward knowing that God would never leave or forsake him, and that God would be with him wherever he went. Are you willing? Am I willing to be confident in the God of Joshua, the God of the Israelites, and the God of you and me? He does not change. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. God spoke to Joshua, and Joshua heard him, and he listened to him, and he was willing to look back and remember the faithfulness of the God in years past, and he knew that it would be no different this time, no matter how he was feeling or what the task was, whether it was a big task or a small task. Am I willing to open our ears to hear what God is saying? Are we willing to open our life in order to be used by God? Great questions. Great questions. Now, verse 9, let me read it to you again. It says, have I, God, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. These words from God were just not good advice. No, they were orders. Joshua was receiving orders from his commander, and Joshua must be strong and courageous. The call was to go, and the promise was, I will be with you. Now, Joshua had the power with him and in him to do the work that God called him to do. You and I have the power with us and in us to do the work that God has called us to do. It's just the way it is. Now, we're at the beginning of a new year, and I'm asking you to join me in pondering the account of Joshua, the call of God, and the faithfulness of a God who never changes. And I will say that over and over and over again. He doesn't change. Now, we are not the children of Israel, and we are not Joshua, thank goodness, but God is the same. We will not be asked to cross over the Jordan. I don't think we will be anyways. And will not be asked to walk around the walls of Jericho, but called to lead 100% yes. Yes, yes, yes. We will more than likely never have to pick up a sword and fight like Joshua and the children of Israel had to, but called to be spiritual warriors for God, 100% yes. Now, generally speaking, will not be asked to lead a whole nation like Joshua was called to do, but no one person is less or more important than the whole nation of Israel. The call is just as important. Now, who is God calling you to lead? And do I take the call seriously? And if not, today, my friends, is the day. Is the call for a family member? A friend, a neighbor? Are you called to lead? Are you being called to start a Bible study in your neighborhood, or with your book club, at work, or maybe even a lunchtime Bible study with your coworkers? By the way, that is all very scary stuff. Are you being called to be brave and stand up in a large group in order to share the gospel, public speaking? Like, that's terrifying. Are you being called to lead with a different attitude than those around you? Are you being called to point those around you to God through your actions and your words? Are you being called to be a prayer warrior? There is no greater weapon than found in the power of prayer, and I believe that with all of my heart. When you seek to pray according to God's wills and His way, there is no greater weapon. And you may ask me, how do you know what to pray? You stay in God's word, and He will show you. He will show you. Are you and I willing to put aside whatever it is that causes fear, that bottom line will stop us from walking in what we have been called to do? Are we willing to believe that the God of Joshua and the God of the Israelites does not change? There it is again, He doesn't change. Are you willing to believe that the same words spoken to Joshua when called by God to move, I will never leave or forsake you, and the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go, are the same words He speaks to you and me when we are called to go? Now, it's a brand new year, as I've said, but not a brand new God. No way, not a brand new God. But let's start this year knowing full well that God is still in the business of calling us to lead, leading people to Him, one person or a whole nation and everything in between. Let's start this new year by thinking about the call, and then taking the call, or I'm actually going to call it a privilege, seriously. I'm going to ask us to reread the story of Joshua and be reminded of the faithfulness of the God who calls, and then look back on our own lives, look back on them, and be reminded of the faithfulness of our God who is still in the business of calling us to go. He doesn't change, but take Him at His word. Be strong and courageous. It's a command, not good advice. And one more time I'm going to say, Joshua had the power in him to do the work that God had called him to do. Joshua had the power with him to do the work that God had called him to do. And God calls and enables, which means you and I have the power with us and in us to do the work that God has called us to do. It also means that when He calls, He also enables. Lead those, my friend, entrusted to you. Lead them by showing them and telling them all that God has done for them and all that He has for them. The call is to go. The promise is God will never leave us or forsake us. He goes with us, and He will, and He has gone before us. Take Him at His word, my friend, and take the call to go seriously, and be full of courage and strength in Him as you move forward. Amen.